Hello everyone, I'm Elfels, and welcome to another match analysis for the Newport Noctiles in Season 12 of the Whooper Club League. Last time I covered my Week 3 match against John and the Close Combat Club, where we both played a drawn-out pivoting game that still somehow led to another great tusk sweep for a 6-0 win. This time we're in Week 4 up against Sasbo and his Boulder Boldores. I've played a couple matches against the Boldores. They were notably my very first match in a standard draft format, where we played in Week 1 of Season 8, and to this day that's still got to be the closest draft league match I've ever played, with my low health Barraskewda clutching it out against his rain team for a 1-0 win. Our next standard draft match was in Season 11, another close one on account of his choice scarf Tapu Fini, but once again I managed to clutch it out in the endgame with a Volcarona sweep this time, netting us a 3-0 win. Our battles have always been pretty close, but I'm hoping to keep the winning record going. Sasbo is doing pretty well for himself though, running with a team of Talonflame, Cyclizar, Round 1 pick Iron Valiant, Lucario, Rotom Heat, Ceruledge, Magnezone, Kingambit, Tinglu, Gastrodon, and Hatterene. There is a ton of bulk and offensive power on this team, with every single one of his 11 team members being either really annoying to break or pretty scary to switch into. The top three especially are pretty emblematic of that, with Iron Valiant being one of the most threatening offensive Pokemon in the game, Tinglu bringing some massive bulk to the table, and Kingambit striking something of a midpoint between those two, with a huge offensive and defensive presence. This is going to be tough to prep for, but I'm at least helped out a little bit by the team having some duplicate roles that I can exploit with my prep. That includes something like the 3 steel types and 3 fire types that he has, so I already have a few ideas to build against that. I actually don't have a single Pokemon on Joe's team that I can write off. Everything is threatening, and to some extent I need to prepare for everything. But we gotta start somewhere, and I'll say Ceruledge doesn't quite look the best here. I think the best thing it has going for it is that with its type and stat spread, it walls Iron Moth pretty well, but other than that, it's kind of falling into his whole duplicate roles problem. It's probably his worst fire type for the matchup of the 3, specifically allowing Great Tusk, Dondozo, and the dark types to get in and do whatever they want. I feel like if it comes though, I'll need to be aware of what type it can Terrasilize into, because with the right type, it could actually be quite threatening with things like Swords Dance or Bulk Up. The team's also got Lucario, which is kind of falling into the same duplicate role camp. Like, if I'm already preparing for Iron Valiant, I'm at least reasonably prepared for this other mixed attacking fighting type, just keeping in mind that it's a little more likely to go physical in this matchup than I think Iron Valiant is. Still, it's a great jack of all trades with a very strong mixed offensive presence and extreme speed as a great anti-offense tool. We also have Cyclizar. It is of course the offensive regenerator pivot, and this is something that offers a lot of utility between fast pivoting and rapid spin, but it doesn't feel explicitly threatening in prep, and if I'm being honest, I don't really have any big ideas for how to even prep well against it. No matter what time I build, I think I'm okay with just dealing with it. It'll just be another annoying fast pivot that I would have to deal with anyway. Then we got Rotom Heat, which I just barely edged out as the best fire type for something else. Just barely. It's a pretty good pivot, and it can be annoying and spread burns, but as I'm alluding to, there is a better fire type in the matchup that I think does that stuff a little better. And then lastly is Gastrodon, missing the cut, which reminds me a lot of Quagsire last week with its walling capabilities. It can be quite annoying to break through, but you can always run random grass coverage to make that easier, but it's annoying to have to run that grass coverage when you want to deal with other members of this threatening team. Honestly, Gastrodon is folded really well into this team dynamic. Grass coverage doesn't really accomplish much else aside from hitting the Tinglu. It just so happens this pick did get traded onto this team for Qwilfish. I am actually pretty happy that Qwilfish is gone because it would have been a hard wall to Azumarill, which otherwise looks great, but that's off topic. Either way, Gastrodon would still be very, very tough to beat. Now onto the 6 I'm most concerned about. I've already hinted at it, but I think Talonflame has a role here as a fast pivoting fire type. It's a solid switch into Great Tusk with resistance to both fighting and ground, as well as its ability Flame Body. It outspeeds my whole team, and it can remove hazards with Defog, so I think it edges out the other fire types as well as Cyclizar for its niche on the team. The more I thought about this, the more I just hated the idea of it switching in with Flame Body and burning something important while defogging or roosting up. Not something I want to deal with. Next up we have Tinglu, and this one's pretty simple. It has massive defensive stats, 155 HP, 125 defense, and 80 SPDEF, bolstered by Vessel of Ruin. Yeah, this is a bulky boy. Just about impossible to break through quickly. My matchup here isn't bad. I can chunk it down pretty hard with some of my breakers while not taking too much damage in return, but it will need to be chipped down over the course of the match if I want to properly clean up at the end. Up next is Magnezone, and the most obvious reason for it to come should be Magnet Pull for Fortress, which otherwise doesn't look too bad for the matchup. You'd think the use would stop there, but Magnezone is surprisingly tough to switch into with the team I'm thinking of bringing. A Choice Spec set could mess with my team pretty hard, or it could throw in Body Press to hit my fighting weaknesses, and that alone kind of makes for a pretty solid breaker. Just like the other Steel type Gambit. This is a terrifying revenge killer and late game sweeper with Swords Dance, as well as that Supreme Overlord ability, especially since it can Terra into any number of types to get out of its crippling weaknesses. I think the best way to beat this is to outtrade it and keep some Sucker Punch resists alive long enough to outlast it, but that might be easier said than done. And the bulky sweeper train keeps on rolling with Hatterene, which Joe has favored quite a bit so far. This is another Pokemon that's looking to outtrade me with its bulk and set up with Calm Mind. I've been really impressed with what it's been doing this season, setting up for a turn or two before using draining moves to keep itself healthy while breaking down other teams to the bones. To build around it, I'm going to have to go with the strategy of making sure my answers to it aren't bait for Giga Drain or Draining Kiss. That way, even if it claims a KO or two off of me, it can't use those KOs to heal up, and that allows me to whittle it down over the course of the battle. And lastly, we have Sazwo's first round pick with Iron Valiant. It goes without saying that this is one of the best Pokemon in the metagame. It gives off pretty heavy Dragapult vibes with its high speed, often alongside that booster energy to get to +1, and any number of sets to choose from, with coverage for everything I can throw at it. Fairy and Fighting are already great, but then you add in Thunderbolt for my water types, Knockoff for Farigiraf, and General Special Offense, or even Fire Punch for Fortress. And you can go any number of directions with this threat. Sazwo has favored Booster Energy Calm Mind for it, but Choice Specs is also a staple, and although it's probably better off going special in this matchup, mixed or physical offense sets with Swords Dance are definitely an option for it. It cannot Terra, but it's diverse enough that without that as an option, it's just still so scary. I'm going to try to pack multiple answers and defensive checks to this giant threat. So we're going to start off the build with an Iron Valiant check that also looks great into the entire team. Azumarill is here once again with max HP and an Assault Vest. This would take hits pretty well from any Iron Valiant set, and Player Up should one-hit KO in your turn every time. Aside from that, Azumarill also looks amazing against everything else. If we force out that Iron Valiant, the Boulders don't have a single save switch into this, especially with Trailblaze as coverage for that Gastrodon. The only Pokemon that I don't hit for super effective coverage would be the Steel types, as well as Hatterene, which I would love to chip down over the course of the match anyway. We're Terra Fairy, not only because it powers up Play Rough, but it also removes Azumarill's weaknesses to Giga Drain from Hatterene, as well as electric moves coming from Rotom or Iron Valiant. This is an amazing matchup for Azumarill. We should be able to get a lot done with this set. Now, Azumarill is a pretty great tool against the fire types, but we probably need a better direct answer to those since I don't want Azumarill getting burned by a Will-O-Wisp or getting hit hard by something like Rotom Volt Switch. That's why the next slot is going to be Hydreigon, which should have no problem switching in on those fire types and then going to town. This is a nasty plot set, since I think we have a lot of setup opportunities with how many things Hydreigon forces out, and then this matchup gives me really interesting coverage options. Dark Pulse is great neutral coverage, and then Flamethrower and Hydro Pump are all we need to hit every Dark Resist, with Hydro Pump especially smacking around that Ting Lu that would want to switch in on me. We have speed to outrun everything up through Lucario, and Terra Fire to boost the power of Flamethrower and turn the Iron Valiant and Hatterene matchups on their heads, resisting Fairy. And Leftovers is the item so we can have a little bit more longevity in the face of those fire types we're trying to switch in on. This completes a bulky offense core that I think has a really good matchup already, so that does give me some room in my offensive core to bring a big threat with less utility, but much more sweeping potential. That's going to be Iron Moth, with probably the most standard set you've seen me run on it so far. This is an agility set with booster energy to boost special attack, which on top of a modest nature adds up to some truly insane damage levels. Add in a few potential fiery dance stacks, and Iron Moth could go on a full sweep. I think there are quite a few opportunities to set up, since Iron Moth does threaten out a few things like the Steel types and that Hatterene, which we may want to Terra in front of, just in case it decides to go for its Psychic move. There are a few roadblocks on the Killer if I'm looking for a full sweep. Ceruledge needs to be out of the picture, and Ting Lu is barely 2-hit KO'd even with a Terra Grass Energy Ball, so that'll need to be chipped down. But I think we can manage that given the Hydreigon that is built specifically to lure it in with Hydro Pump. The moveset here is pretty simple. Dual Stabs get pretty good coverage for a sweep while also being pretty good in isolation. Fiery Dance can proc special attack boosts, and Sludge Wave is a great emergency button against an out-of-control Hatterene, doing insane damage even through Calm Mind boosts. Energy Ball is for Gastrodon as well as the aforementioned Ting Lu, with Terra Grass to boost it up for those cases. As for the EVs, we of course max out special attack with enough speed to outrun +1 Iron Valiant after an agility, which doesn't take that much EVing, so the rest is dumped into defense. This could give Iron Moth some setup opportunities against some weaker physical attacks, but it also allows us to tank a priority move or two so it can keep the sweep going. Alright, that's pretty much the offensive core, so we'll switch over to bulkier things so I can ensure I always switch in on the Boulder's offensive threats. For that purpose, I'm going with Max HP Great Tusk, and this here is mostly to be a consistent answer to King Gambit, Ting Lu, and maybe a Magnezone in a pinch. Just going max HP with leftovers means that Great Tusk can take hits from those threats all day, well, for the most part. And from there, Adamant Close Combat is our tool to hit them back, with the rest of the moveset being utility. Rocks are always great, Rapid Spin removes the hazards that Ting Lu would want to set up, and Knockoff preserves a way to hit Talonflame and Sarrowledge while still being a great option into just about everything else for that item removal. No ground coverage feels kind of weird, but I think that really just would get me extra damage into the Hatterene and Iron Valiant, two things I don't really want to stay in on anyway, so I didn't see myself clicking a ground move in this matchup. We have just enough speed to always outrun non-Scarf Magnezone, and the Terra type is fighting. I don't really plan on using this, but it does boost up the power of close combat, while keeping a similar defensive profile that still beats the dark types I'm trying to check. So this slot was some extra insurance against the physical attackers, so now I'll give another team slot to help out against these special threats, with specially defensive Farigiraf to round things out. This is mostly a switch into Iron Valiant, since we should never be 2-hit KO'd by any special move unless it's a +1, in which case our Citrus Berry comes into play with Cudshoe for some legitimately great HP recovery. This will give me the time to 2-hit KO the Iron Valiant back with Psychic, even through a Calm Mind boost, and we should even 1-hit KO if it's not Calm Mind boosted. The rest of the moveset is Utility, which Protect is more consistent recovery, and it allows Farigiraf to go on Cleric duty because Azumarill, Hydreigon, and Great Tusk would all love the help there. Lastly, Baton Pass is here because Farigiraf can switch in on a few other special attackers in the matchup, but lacks the ability to threaten them back with just Psychic, so Baton Pass gets us a slow pivot out into my offensive threats. I can see myself making that play against something like the Magnezone, which I otherwise don't switch into that well. The Terra type here is Fairy, kind of an afterthought, but it allows us to resist Dark in a pinch while still walling up on Iron Valiant, so it works. With one team slot left, I felt comfortable against just about everything except for that Hatterene, which I'm still not super well prepared for with my first 5 picks. With just Terra Fire, Nasty Plot Hydreigon, and Booster Energy Iron Moth to deal with it, but those both use up pretty big resources to win that matchup. So I wanted to have a more consistent answer. Fortress with a Steel move was locked into this slot for a while, but I didn't like the potential of getting trapped in my Magnezone, and Hatterene could just run Mystical Fire anyway. So instead, I'm going with the physically defensive Poltegeist to deal with it. We should be able to switch in on Hatterene anytime it comes in, and it's a pretty good matchup for the Teacup. The physical defense investment and our natural special defense stat means that we can take a few hits, even with Hatterene using Psyshock, and our Shadow Ball off our uninvested special attack stat still does huge damage back to it. That's the main point of the set, with the other move slots maximizing utility against the rest of the team. Will-O-Wisp cripples the dark types that would come in to take a Shadow Ball, and to ensure that I get that burn off as safely as possible, I even have a Colbur Berry and a few extra points in speed in case that King Gambit wants to try and speed creep me. We're actually not Willow Hex, despite that being pretty intuitive, mostly because of the Will-O-Wisp targets are kind of the opposite of the Shadow Ball targets. Will-O-Wisp is mostly for the dark types, which resist Ghost, and Shadow Ball is mostly for Hatterene, which is immune to Will-O-Wisp anyway, so there are a relatively few targets I would be trying to hit with a boosted Hex. The other 2 move slots should help to keep Poltegeist healthy, with Strength Sap as nice, somewhat consistent recovery, and Giga Drain to really put the hurt on Gastrodon, while also tickling Ting Lu, I guess. If I play this right, it should be a thorn in Joe's side. Here's hoping this weird set puts in work. That's going to be the team for week 4. Let's see how it pans out. Well, this is weird. I suggested before that I didn't have the clearest idea of which 6 to prepare for, but the only guesses I got right were Ting Lu and Iron Valiant, with no King Gambit, no Magnezone, and biggest of all, no Hatterene. That does free up Poltegeist to play a bigger utility role in this battle, but it looks like Sazbo also has quite a bit more utility on his side between Rotom, Gastrodon, and Cyclizar, with the offense being compressed down to his 2 fighting types. Well, this is kind of going to be a weird one. As for leads, my main thoughts going into this boiled down to Poltegeist for early burn spreading, or Hydreigon for early damage. Given what's actually here though, Hydreigon should match well into any potential lead aside from maybe Cyclizar, and I'm kind of expecting the Rotom. So let's try that. Good luck, have fun to Sazbo. And yes, that's the Rotom lead. Pretty much exactly what I was hoping for as a Hydreigon matchup. So as for what to do now, I know I'll need some damage on this at some point for Iron Moth to sweep later, but I don't know about going for the immediate Hydro Pump. I think Gastrodon might be his default switch into this, so instead I'll make a play that should cover any defensive switch. A Nasty Plot shouldn't be punished by anything the Rotom has. We'll go for it, and Discharge is not going to do too much, but it does paralyze, unfortunately. Well, that does kind of suck, but to be fair, I accepted that as a possibility by staying in. Plus, Hydreigon should still be able to do its job as a bulky attacker. It's just annoying. But anyway, I think it's about time Rotom gets out of here, fearing a boosted attack, so I should be able to fire off something for free. Let's just go with Dark Pulse over Hydro Pump in case that Gastrodon switches in. Volt Switch makes a lot of sense, as the Ting-Lu switches in, and I get fully paralyzed. Okay, well, Dark Pulse was resisted anyway, so whatever. This does look like a free Hydro now, though. And as I go for it, we'll get a nice 74% on a Ting-Lu as it just sets up some spikes. This is great for me. Ting-Lu being this low opens up a lot of options for me later on. It's now in range of just about every offensive piece that I have, so that's a big roadblock kind of out of the way. On the follow-up, though, I am still a little worried about that Gastrodon coming in to take a Hydro Pump, so Dark Pulse is quite tempting, but I'm going to make the kind of mid-ground play with Flamethrower, since that should finish off the Ting-Lu based on the Hydro Pump damage, without proccing that Storm Drain if Gastrodon does come in. But instead it's going to be the Cyclizar, which takes a little over half from Flamethrower. Man, I wish I clicked Dark Pulse here. One could argue that I should have committed to either Hydro Pump or Dark Pulse here, and while I'm okay with my logic behind Flamethrower, in hindsight maybe I should have done something a little more committal. As it stands though, despite some bad RNG, I'm okay with how these first few turns played out. Ting-Lu is super chipped, and that's so important for later that I'm okay with paying for it with Layer Spikes and a Paralyzed Hydreigon. But I do have to deal with the Cyclizar now, which is probably looking to take me out with the Draco. I have a couple of options to deal with this. Azumarill is the most obvious, but I'm afraid of Knockoff taking out my Assault Vest, which looks really useful later on. I also thought about popping my Terra on Hydreigon now to get rid of my Dragon weakness, but that really cuts into my ability to switch into Rotom and Gastrodon later, so that's kind of a no-go. Instead, I'm going to choose something that's a little more expendable while also not being able to take the hit. Poltegeist has no Hatterene to check, so I'm okay with coming in to take the Draco. Take my Spikes damage, and it is a Draco for 56%. That's max special attack on Cyclizar, which is good to know, but I am pretty low. Well, here, I'm fine with going for Strength Sap to stay healthy. Funny curse body. Yep, we take that knockoff, and Strength Sap brings us back to pretty healthy numbers. I'm cool with that. I don't think the Holber had too much use beyond this without Kingambit in the picture. But anyway, now I don't know what he's trying to do. I don't think Cyclizar has much to hit me with anymore, so this is probably a switch out? Sure, but I don't really have a guaranteed way to be productive on that, so I might as well just heal all the way back up to full with another Strength Sap. That'll have to be fine. Turns out to be Rotom, which I will be more than happy to get Chip onto with the Shadow Ball, but no, he just full switches out. Funny Curse Body into the Gastrodon, and this Shadow Ball hits for some damage. We actually get the special defense drop. Well, I'm very happy to see this matchup. It looks like this Gastrodon is fairly specially defensive, but Giga Drain looks like a really good chance to KO, especially with that special defense drop. Let's just go for it. But he reveals the Protect to scout that out. Great Bring. That's a good call on a 4x Gravity Sweetness, to be fair. Well, Joe does see my play now, so it seems unlikely that he'll try to stay in here. He does have a few different Giga Drain resists, and I'd love to hit a couple of them with Will-O-Wisp. I'm looking specifically at that Cyclizar, which would be great to get some residual chip onto. So let's fire it off. But yeah, Rotom is the natural play to take it. A bit unfortunate, but I'm realizing that he's not really committing to anything to hit Poltegeist that hard, so maybe we can force something by just continuing to heal up with Strength Sap. Funnily enough, this is the turn where he did commit and hits me with Discharge, which in turn is disabled by a Curse Body as I get healthy again. Right there. Alright, well this feels like a safe time to just Shadow Ball. He'll Will-O-Wisp, probably just trying to get me chipped down a little bit as I get a good chunk of damage off. Very nice, we're getting everything into Iron Moth range for later. This also reveals, might have revealed it earlier already, but the Rotom has leftovers, which I thought was a little weird over Boots. Maybe we can pick up some rocks later to really put pressure on this. As for now, though, I don't think Sazwo is going to want to stay in and let the Rotom get chipped down even more, so I'm going to be a bit aggressive reading the Gastrodon switch in with a Giga Drain as he full switches out, but it's just going to be the Cyclizar instead. Yeah, good safe play on his part, that is fair. At least better than whiffing off a Shadow Ball on my part into this normal type. I am getting a little low in health, and this could knock off for pretty big damage, so time for another Strength Sap. But it's just going to be double right out for more Regenerator Recovery as Ting-Lu pivots in. So at this point, I could try to get a Will-O-Wisp onto this to negate that Leftovers, but that feels like a really easy way for him to get back into Rotom on another switch. And yeah, I'm kind of getting tired of this sequence. I'm realizing that Sazwo is pivoting around really well, getting Leftovers and Regenerator Recovery every time I miss the read on a pivot, so I do think I'm slowly losing this battle. With that in mind, I'd like to swap out to something that forces a bit more of a committal option, so I'm going to go back into Hydreigon, which should be able to handle both this and the likely Rotom switch in. That's actually going to be a Whirlwind, though, which drags in Azumarill. Well, this is nice. Thanks, Ting-Lu. Now all I have to do is choose the right move. It feels like basically a 50-50 between reading the Rotom or Gastrodon coming in. And because Gastrodon feels like it would be safer, not one-hit KO'd by a water move, I'm going to read that and go for the Play Rough. But, of course, it's the Rotom that comes in. Man, Sazwo is sure making the right decisions with all these pivots. It's not all bad, though. I did get nice chip onto that Rotom with a lucky crit. I have it very comfortably in Iron Moth range, even if it gets several rounds of Leftovers recovery at this point. For now, though, Aqua Jet does miss the KO here, so I'll have to retreat. Hydreigon is still a pretty easy switch in. There we go. Yep, that Will-O-Wisp won't do a thing, and this actually looks like a pretty free Dark Pulse. Worst case, Ting-Lu switches in and we keep it low, so let's do it. It is going to Volt Switch out into the Cyclizar. Ooh, let's go. Ooh, full para. Well, that really sucks. I would have loved to bring this thing below half again, but as it is, I'll have to bring in Azumarill since Polteageist is pretty chipped down, I guess, and take more spikes, and lose my Assault Vest because Sazwo made another good read. Okay, can I match it here? Last time he swapped in Rotom on Azumarill, and I should be more motivated than ever to go for Play Rough to hit what's in front of me right now, so now let's go for Liquidation to hit that Rotom. Oh, okay, now you switch to Gastrodon. I'm just getting every one of these wrong, huh? Between that and the Hydreigon full para, this game is starting to get a little frustrating, but let's move on. After this Leftovers recovery, Trailblaze is an option to hit the Gastrodon, but I'm seeing a pretty low chance to KO from this range, and I'm actually kind of afraid of a boosted attack coming my way. So, once again, if Polteageist feels a little expendable here, I'll just go ahead and come in on what turns out to be the Sludge Bomb. That's a nice tech move to deal with Azumarill, but Polteageist Poison Resist actually helps out. And how many Curse Bodies have I gotten at this point? Wow. Okay. Well, there's no way he's going to just stay in and let me click Giga Drain here, so I'm going to make the safe play and just Shadow Ball into whatever switches in. Or, I guess it could go Terra Poison, and then get its rocks up. So this is the second week in a row where a Water Ground type terastallizes into a Poison type against me, although I do totally understand where it's coming from here. Gastrodon is now a super counter to Azumarill, resisting one stab and being immune to the other. I actually didn't have the best ways of dealing with this as a poison type, so I'm just going to go for Will-O-Wisp on this turn to cut off that Leftovers recovery, I guess. As Earth Power, that brings me way too low, but Silver Lining, that was actually Gastrodon's fourth move revealed, and it does not have Recover. That does make this a lot easier to deal with. I think I am just going to sack Polteageist off for the damage on this next turn, but of course, my Shadow Ball is not going to go into anything, as Gastrodon just protects, and Polteageist goes down to the burn damage for a 5v6 game. I'm okay with that. That was a good play on Sazwo's part. Polteageist really wasn't amazing here, but we did have some chip on Rotom and that burn on Gastrodon, which could be pretty crucial later. Better yet, I can just go right into Great Tusk as the revenge, and threaten a big headlong rush into the now Poison-type Gastrodon. Well, I say that, but you might remember that I'm not actually carrying any ground moves on this guy, so this is just a bluff. What I really want to do is clear these hazards out, so I'm going to go ahead and spin on the switch, hopefully. Yes, and that'll go right into the Cyclozar, and those rocks and spikes are going to be gone. Now, unfortunately, because Great Tusk is running a very bulky spread this week, I probably don't outspeed this after a Rapid Spin, so I need to switch out of the potential Draco, which would hurt a lot. So, Azumarill just comes in, and yes, we actually made the right call. Feels like the first good read I've made in a hot minute. So here we are again with Azumarill, speaking of reads. All game, I have been making the wrong reads about which move to hit on the switch-in, but now because that Gastrodon has Terrastalized, that actually kind of works to my advantage. If Sazbo's Azumarill switch-in was ambiguous before, it's super obvious now that Gastrodon is going to be his answer, so I can use that to double right out. Yes, as Gastrodon comes in, so does Great Tusk, and I'm once again in a pretty nice spot. I'm theoretically pretty threatening to this. I do still have to hope that Gastrodon is just threatened out enough, as I'm going to get up my rocks on what I hope to be his free switch, but he actually stays in, and Earth Power does a bigger chunk than I was hoping to see on Great Tusk. Okay, maybe I just need to start hitting this. Knockoff is my best move into it. It's going to bring the Gastrodon to decently low health, and Earth Power brings me down low as well. But keep in mind, Gastrodon is losing unrecoverable health every turn while I'm gaining it back with lefties. It does look like Close Combat might KO here despite the resist, so I'm going to go for that. Oddly enough, Gastrodon goes for Protect, and I mean, after this turn with the extra Burn Shape, Close Combat should definitely KO now, so all the more free. Close Combat KOs Gastrodon, and we are now in a 5-on-5 game as the Cyclozar comes in, and I want to take this moment to look at the game state. On my side, Great Tusk is below half, Hydreigon is near full health but paralyzed, and Azumarill has some chip and its item removed. Meanwhile, the progress I've made includes Rotom and Tinglu both below half, as well as my opponent's Terra are revealed and KO'd, but not much else. That seems like maybe a slight disadvantage for me, if anything, but I think I still have the checks I need to his threats, saved for maybe some trouble with physical Lucario with Great Tusk so low. Well, Sazbo is looking a little worn down with his checks to Iron Moth, and I might be staring down an agility setup opportunity right here with this Cyclozar. If this is his choice for a revenge, it may just be trying to take out Great Tusk with a Draco, and then after that it probably can't touch a revenging Iron Moth. So let's try to sack Great Tusk here and then maybe go for game? Ah, just a Rapid Spin. And my Close Combat that I clicked will KO even through the Chople Berry that he reveals. Dang, Great Tusk is strong. Well, not the setup opportunity as I was hoping for, but I'll certainly take KOs where I can get them. Iron Valiant does make sense as the revenge as it pops its booster energy, and this is a threat, but I still have a very dedicated check to it, so Farigiraf is going to be the easy switch in. On the substitute, that's interesting. No problem though, we'll take the Moonblast, which crits and gets a special attack drop, geez, but we have our Setch's Berry, and Psychic breaks the sub. This is fine. I can just attack again with the safety of Kudchu on the next turn. Even if I don't KO here, Iron Valiant should go down into Aqua Jet range, and that's really all we need. But it is just going to sub up again, so Psychic breaks that, and we get our second Berry, as I almost get back up to full. I wonder what this thing's strategy is right now. I'm just going to keep attacking, but this time, Sazbo's going to switch to Tinglu. Fair enough, I guess. Yeah, I can't touch this with Farigiraf, which is a bit unfortunate, but I mean, I forced the Iron Valiant off of its booster energy, so that's fine. Now, as for the Tinglu, I have a few options, but I'll go with Great Tusk as something that can take a hit while not being subject to a full para. Hydreigon's starting to get annoying to use. Earthquake, it does do a lot of my remaining health, but we live, and now Close Combat looks pretty free. We should be taking something out, I think. As Iron Valiant comes in, we actually don't take it out. That surprised me. It turns out it's a little bulkier on the physical side than I thought it was, but regardless, it is now an Aqua Jet range, which is important. Great Tusk has done a pretty good job in this battle, but I think I'm okay with letting go of it now. I might as well just attack in case Iron Valiant wants to set up, because that would be pretty bad for me at this point. Rapid Spin will secure the KO if I manage to live, but it's actually going to be a very aggressive switch out to Lucario as I hit that Rapid Spin and boost my speed. Well, this is nice. My calcs tell me that Extreme Speed has a chance to KO me here, but I might as well just go for it. It doesn't even attempt the priority move, and Close Combat just takes it out, which is cool. Great Tusk now has 3 KOs on the board to this match, but the fun should be over with Iron Valiant coming back in check. Oh, but it's the Rotom. Right, I know Iron Valiant probably outspeeds me, but Joe has no reason to think that, does he? No matter, close combat the Rotom for the 4th KO to Great Tusk out of 4. I was seriously not expecting a sweep from this guy again, but now the fun really does end. Iron Valley can come in and outspeed me for the KO. Now, to be honest, this was kind of an oversight in prep. It would have only taken a few extra speed EVs to turn this into a full sweep, but like I said, this wasn't really supposed to be a fast sweeping set. Great Tusk, what are you doing? Anyway, from here, it's pretty simple. Azumarill can come in and claim the Aqua Jet KO on this, easy. And then one last KO on Ting-Lu with a Play Rough. Oh, it lived. Okay. Well, one last KO with a 100% accurate Liquidation to take the game 4-0. Good game to Sazbo. This was an intense one. I can't lie, the RNG was a little frustrating on my end, but I don't think it ended up being too impactful in this match. Much more impactful was Sazbo's amazing pivoting game early on, really using Polteageist's passive, relative passivity and Azumarill's on and off coverage to pivot around and get some passive recovery and positioning. That Cyclizar Gastrodon Rotom core was getting really frustrating to break through. It was pretty effective, and the game only changed when I had to start forcing his hand to play more aggressively. It added up to an endgame where we both got chipped down, but all we really needed was a Great Tusk that refused to back down, and an Azumarill to clean things up at the end. Speaking of individual Pokemon, though, let's talk about them. Polteageist was a bit weird here. The matchup I brought it for didn't show up, and Sazbo was able to pivot around it pretty effectively, but it did do a decent job of chipping things down over the course of the battle, and not a bad performance, all things considered. Fergraf came and did exactly what it's supposed to do, no complaints there. Iron Moth didn't show its face, but there's always the potential, although I'm getting a little antsy waiting for this guy to actually perform. Hydreigon was pretty nice, despite the para hacks, but that early chip on Ting-Lu was amazing. Azumarill switched in on multiple strong moves and still cleaned up at the end, although I really should have terastallized it for Play Rough on the last turn. Not really sure why I didn't. And Great Tusk is, well, Great Tusk. This thing claims so many KOs in this battle that I really wasn't expecting out of it. Maybe I just need to lean into the power of the Tusk a little more. It certainly worked out so far. I guess that makes Great Tusk the MVP, powering right through an endgame that I thought was going to be a lot more involved. Although big shoutouts to Azumarill for its bulk and power at the end there. That's going to be a wrap for week 4. So I'm up to 4-0 for the season, going into my bye week at the halfway point. That puts me at a pretty good spot, first in the rankings from a pure numbers perspective, and at this point it would be pretty tough for me not to take the playoffs. Make the playoffs. The rest of my schedule is a mixed bag, 2 teams near the bottom of the rankings and 2 teams near the top. We're going to see what happens. I'm hoping for 4 more wins, but we'll see. I'll get a break for week 5, but after that I'll be back in week 6 against Josh and his Zanesville Zigzagoons. See you next time, everybody.